Good evening and welcome to today's Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. I am Brenda Holt with AARP Arizona. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members across the nation, and approximately 900,000 right here in Arizona, we work to strengthen communities and we advocate for what matters most to families, such as health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. In the month of July, we will lean into AARP's return to in-person local events, volunteering and AARP rewards, and amplify the call to action for the 50-plus community to deepen connections. AARP has focused on the important work of being a wise friend and fierce defender for people 50 plus during the pandemic, demonstrating our commitment to their good health and financial security. As we face another summer with pandemic concerns and record inflation, the health and wealth communications continue to be important. Though so, too, does connecting with others in the name of health and happiness. We will meet this moment by offering flexibility, returning to free in-person events in local communities, as well as providing virtual experiences where people 50 plus can make these connections. To learn something new, to have some fun, and to discover new interest, please visit us at www.aarp.org/local or www.aarp.org/az. Thank you for attending tonight's event. Enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, non-white every folk, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Well, hello, good evening. I am so happy you can join us this evening. Oh my gosh, welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy that you're here. Oh, and I see someone's already found the chat, which is always really good. So, you are welcome to drop notes in there. You can chat back and forth. So, now today is July 7th. And so today back in 1923 was the first meeting of the Navajo Tribal Council was held. And it was Chi Dodge who'd served as their first chairman. Now, it's also Bonza Bottler Day, which I had never even heard this term, but it's celebrated once a month when the number of the month and the number of the day coincide. So because today is 7/7, it is indeed Bonza Bottler Day. So now we're celebrating. It is also World Chocolate Day. And so that is said to really represent supposedly almost to the day in like 1550 when chocolate came to Europe. I don't know how they quite got it down to this day, but I'm so glad that we did get chocolate because it's quite delicious. It is also National Macaroni Day, and I think that's probably because they want to torture folks after just coming off of 4th of July and having macaroni salad, mac and cheese. So why not celebrate it when you've had far too much of it? So there you go. It is also National Dive Bar Day, and that is because it's 7/7. So which will get to in just a little bit as we talk about our cocktail, but we've got some other things to talk about. So what can you expect tonight? Well, we've got a little bit of trivia coming up with our amazing guest. We always have a little Arizona town, some Arizona music history, as well as From the Vault, which might be something you drive by every day, but you didn't know anything about it, and just trying to highlight some of those things as well as a beverage. So if this is your first time, you might be wondering, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, I got to Arizona about 22 years ago from Brooklyn. I was working in a beautiful Carnegie building and traded that for a 1950 library in South Phoenix. Oh, Karen, you're having a chocolate shake with rum. How decadent. And so, when I got to Harmon Library, there was this rich oral history of the community. And that was one of the things that got me questioning, how do people interact with that modern history? And then we promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch house. Now, when we moved in, it was oh so many tones of beige. I'm happy to say now that it is just two-tone, seafoam cantaloupe. And there's what my kitchen looks like even today. All that buttercream yellow tile, the best that 1956 could produce, and GE electric appliances to match it as well. Now, as soon as I got here, all I heard, there was no history here. But that didn't last very long, because every time I went somewhere, I kept coming across so many amazing people, places, and stories. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we all know and love today. All those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed on to somewhere else. And after the war, they were moving here in huge numbers. And they were looking for a new way of life, which they sure enough did find, as I'm sure many of you did as well. Now, I'm also called the hip historian because I get to have fun with Arizona history. And so why just coming up in just a couple days on Saturday, I'm going to be on Good Morning Arizona for a few minutes, kind of talking about Arizona History Happy Hour. So we can get some more folks watching, and and some folks are just having a glass of wine. Well, there you go. That's easy to make. Coming up, I'm going to be this weekend, I'm going to be out in Glendale as we talk about Disney in Arizona. And then next week, I'm going to be out in Chandler doing the exact same thing. And so come on out and see me, and let's chat some Disney history right here. And then later this month, I'm going to be making my way down to Bisbee with my friend Deb and Francine. And we are going to be talking some ghost stories, some LGBTQ history, as well as just enjoying the Greenaway House. And then rumor has it there's going to be a seance. So we shall see what happens. All right. So now if at some point you want to say something that maybe you don't want to put in the chat, or maybe you like, he needs to really see this, because, some of my best ideas and connections come from all of you saying, hey, by the way, here's my friend. You should know what they've done. And so please reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, email, or even through my website. It's all hip historian centric. And now it is time for a cocktail. Now, let's see. It's been a while since I've done this, and I think PJ was trying to make me go to task. So let's see. Okay. So it's been a while since I actually had to mix anything. And so this is just that classic 7 and 7. So he gave me a 7-Up, a can of 7-Up, and a little airline bottle of Seagram 7. So I don't have to do too much mixing. I have a feeling he might be getting ready for something, because usually he gives me pre-mixed. So, all right. And there we'll add a little bit of 7-Up into there. And there you go. You have a classic beverage that you can find in almost any dive bar across Arizona and beyond. Hopefully you all have your own favorite dive bar. I know I do. And Josh Stacy over at Puppet Pie made the little mini me. So, all right. So let's get rid of that. There we go. And then we'll go back to here. So there we have the classic 7 and 7. Yep, tastes like I'm at a dive bar. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but there you go. So thank you, PJ, for finding just the right cocktail. And so, I talk a big game about being from New York, but I actually grew up in a little tiny town in the Midwest. And so because of that, I think I have like an affinity for not just a big city, but also a small city. And so tonight we're going to talk about Page, Arizona, which is a relatively new town when you look at Arizona history, 1957. A little under 7,500 people living there, off in Coconino County. Now, when you start talking the history, you can go on the Lee's Ferry history site. There is a walk you can do, and it really talks about how in the 1860s, some Mormon men built a raft and basically made a way to get across the Colorado River. Now, they were by no means the first people to live there, but the Glen Canyon Dam, when that came in the early 60s, it did flood some of those ancestral lands. And they are still underwater. There's actually still an effort afoot. There are still people wanting to have the dam taken down. And I know there's been more and more issues with this now that our water level is kind of going down as well. So it will be interesting to see what happens with that. And so that created Lake Powell, which is, you can take boat rides, you can rent pontoon boats and hang out there. It was also where they filmed Planet of the Apes, not just the 1960s version, but the one from 2000s. So they filmed that right there as well, because that terrain looks out of this world. And indeed it does. Horseshoe Bend is probably one of the most photographed sites in possibly all of Arizona, because it is spectacular. And last week, we talked about Antelope Canyon, and so that is right there in Page as well. And so you're able to go into a slot canyon and get amazing photos just like this. Now, the slot canyons are on Navajo land, so you'll have to go with a Navajo guide, but it is well worth it to get into some of these spots. And one of the things I think is beautiful about the Antelope Canyon is there's a variety of canyons kind of connected with that, one of which you can literally drive into. So pretty much anybody, regardless of your abilities, can get in and see this phenomenon. So hopefully, maybe I've encouraged some of you to maybe get up to Antelope Canyon and to Page. And now I'm so excited to be able to share with you, my friend. Let's see. Oh, I got to click on the right button. There we go. Hello, Dianne.
Hello.
How are you this evening?
Well, so far so good. Can't complain.
Exactly. So for folks that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an attorney and I moved here in 1980. I've did family law for 18 years, representing battered women and molested children. And that does cause a bit of a burnout, shall we say. And 18 years was about it for me. So I switched over at that time to international law. And I worked for another 15 years doing human rights law, primarily focusing on still battered women and molested children all around the world. Lived in 7 different countries, worked in 14 different countries, and just had a great time. Now I'm back here causing all the trouble that I can manage to think about to cause.
Very good. All right. And so I know we've got some trivia coming up that we created, so that way you can talk about something near and dear to your heart.
Absolutely.
So now when we do trivia here, it's not like your typical bar trivia, because what we'll do is we'll go through our questions and answers. They're all multiple choice. So that way, if you don't know the answer, all you got to do is guess. And then we'll come back and go through, and Dianne will talk about some of those stories that make those answers. So now you can keep track of your trivia in a notebook, your hand, and a marker, whatever makes you happy.
You know,
Exactly. It's all good and fun. All right. So let's roll out question number 1. What is the ERA? Is it the Environmental Restitution Arena? B, the Equal Rights Amendment? C, Equality for Race Action? Or D, Everyone Remembers Athena? All right. Well, you're trying to remember, racking your brain, going, ERA, what does that stand for? All right. We're going to move on to question 2. What happened to the ERA back in 1923? A, it was introduced to Congress. V, voted out of Congress. C, a list of goals were created. Or D, made the cover of the Arizona Republican. So, all right. Well, you're trying to think back to way back in 1923. Question 3. When was the ERA first introduced to Arizona? Was it A, 1949, B, 1979, C, 1984, or D, 2001? So when do you think the ERA was first introduced in Arizona? All right, question 4. Who was an early sponsor of the ERA in Arizona? Was it A, William O'Malley, B, George Ernst, C, Wing F. Ong, or D, W.G. Rosenbaum? So out of those folks, who do you think was an early sponsor, supporter of the ERA in Arizona? Question 5. Who introduced the ERA that was approved by the U.S. House on October 12th of 1971? Was it A, Karen Bass, B, Sandy Adams, C, Melissa Bean, or D, Martha Griffiths? All right. Well, you're trying to think in the 70s, what was going on? We are going to hit question 6. The ERA was passed by Congress in 72. What Arizona senator promoted its passage? Was it A, Ernest McFarland? Was it B, Barry Goldwater? C, Senator O'Connor? Or D, Carl Hayden? So what what Arizona senator promoted its passage? Question 7. How many times has the ERA been heard in the Arizona Senate? Is it A, 2, B, 17 times, C, 29, or D, 35? How many times do you think the ERA was heard in the Arizona Senate? All right. Question 8. 2019. What was used to inform residents about the ERA? Was it A, a Goodyear blimp, B, billboards, C, sign spinners, or D, interrupt a basketball game? All right. Moving on to question 9. In 2019, the best of from Capital Times listed the ERA as what? A, the most correct bill, B, the worst bill, C, the hardest sell, or D, on par with charter school reform? So what do you think the Capital Times listed the ERA as back in 2019? Question 10. What was Donna Carlson West against? Was she against PETA? Was she against the ERA? How did she feel about light rail or payday loan businesses? Which one of those do you think Donna Carlson West was against? And then we have a bonus question, which is, who was Peter Kay? Was he A senator from Arizona, B, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, C, a parliamentarian, or D, all of the above? All right. Well, you're trying to figure all those out and lock in your final guess, although I think some of you may have known some of these answers. So we are going to move on and take a little bit of an Arizona music break. And so we're going to talk about Los Azaleas. So they are a group out of Tempe, all Latina string instruments players from Tucson who love harmonizing, performing mariachi, boleros, tropical sounds, and performing music that's composed or popularized by pioneering women in Latin music. And they're doing all of that right down in Tucson. And they're a pretty great group of ladies. All right. So who's ready for some answers? See, I know Mary Carmen was like, yes, I want some answers, please. All right. So what is the ERA? And it is B, the Equal Rights Amendment. So Dianne, what does that mean?
Well, it means it's 24 words. And if some of us who can remember back to when this was a big fight in the 80s, it was, oh my God, there's pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff. Nobody can understand it. None of that was true. And we said that over and over again. It's 24 words. It said the United States and no other state may, on the basis of sex, treat someone differently under the law. So not under religion, not under your own roof, under the law. So that we all, everyone, and you notice it doesn't say men or women. It says based on sex. So everyone has to be treated equally under the law. And you can't make such distinctions based on sex to treat someone differently. So that's all it says.
All right. Question 2. What happened back in 1923? And it was introduced to Congress. Do you have anything to add, Dianne, about the fact that so early, I mean, in the early 20s, it was in Congress?
Well, this was also, it wasn't contested, but it was a difference of opinion amongst the different women's groups. They'd been fighting for the voting rights, remember? And there was a battle within that regarding the younger women wanted to go for the whole banana. They wanted the ERA from the beginning. They didn't want to just ask for voting rights. They wanted.
Oh, okay.
The older women, the old guard, they said, we're never going to get that. So let's just take a half a loaf and let's get voting, and then we can vote in some decent people, blah, 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 blah. And then there was the racial issue as well, where the Southern women didn't want the Black women to be included in the movement. And, the Western women didn't want the Mexican women in the movement or the Hispanic women in the movement. So there were a lot of issues going on. So Alice Paul and the younger, more radical group broke off and they formed their own party. And then it was clear they were the ones with the momentum. They sort of were what we would call today the Women's March. They went out and did actions and garnered thousands of people to march down the New York City streets. And this was, then the older guard said, maybe they got something here. So they got back together again as one group, but they did end up with simply the voting rights first, which was our 19th Amendment. And that was in 1920. So this was 1923. So it was very shortly thereafter. Alice Paul had been working on this, her and the others, Lucy Burns and all the others, had been working on this the whole time because they knew we need more than voting. We need legal equality. And the Dobbs decision has made that perfectly clear, because the Dobbs decision said, you're not in the Constitution. You don't have any rights in there that I got to respect. So off with you now. So it's very clear we need the ERA now more than ever. So Alice Paul then worked on that, blah, blah. And they had different language at the beginning when it was first introduced. And the language has changed over time to mirror the 15th Amendment, so that it wouldn't be anything new when they saw it. It mirrored the 15th and the 19th Amendment language, so that the senators and representatives and legislators wouldn't be freaked out. It's like, oh, we've seen this before. It's just another group. So what happened And this is a little known fact, but when it finally passed in 71 and they came back, of course, Alice was older by this time. And when they came back to the office, she was sitting at her desk crying. And they thought she was crying in happiness. She wasn't. She was crying because she said, that 7-year timeline in the preface, that'll kill us. And here we are, 50 years later, and what's killing us? That timeline in the preface. She knew her stuff.
All right. So when was the ERA first introduced in Arizona? 1949. Oh my gosh. And I did find this in the Arizona Republican. And I thought what was really interesting was it talks about privileges of inns, restaurants, eating houses, barber shops, public conveyances, theaters, and all other places of public accommodation and amusement.
And this was back in 49. Arizona actually started as a progressive state. We did. That's why we have the initiative process. That was one of the things that we had so that the people would not be bowled over by idiot legislators like the ones we got now. And that's why they had a separate corporation commission. And I'm working on a case with that. That's why I happen to know this. And when they wrote it, they said, we don't want these corporations because they'd already had mining and logging and cattle ranching and that sort of thing. And they saw what corporations did and how these big businesses took advantage of little people. And they said, we want a separate corporation commission, not that these laws be made by the legislature. So that's why we've got a separate corporation commission that is elected separately from the legislature to be independent of the legislators. So, I mean, we had a lot of early progressive things in our Constitution. And we actually women could vote, in territorial days. And then when they introduced, tried to become a state, they put in the Arizona Constitution, it was rejected because they had women voting. So they sent it back and said they wouldn't approve Arizona so long as they let women vote. So they said, okay, I forget who, it was the first governor. I forget which one it was now, but it's the first governor. So he said, okay, take it out. And everybody was just aghast. Well, I sent it back in again. They approved it. It came back next year, put it back in. So women could vote, in Arizona before they could vote nationally. So what happened was the Goldwater movement in the 60s, and away we went to where we are now.
All right. And who was an early sponsor of the ERA in Arizona? And it was Wing F. Ong. And I love that I was able to find a business card of his, and it talks about progressive aggressive. So the fact that I think that it made its way into Arizona that early is pretty kind of incredible.
Yep. We need some more of them progressive aggressives. Aggressives.
All right. Who introduced the ERA that was approved by the House on October 12th, 1971? And it was Martha Griffiths.
And looking at some notes in the comments here, she was a Republican. And can I tell you my story now?
Of course, please do.
Before COVID, I was running around the state talking to all kinds of groups about the ERA, educating people, getting them to contact their legislators, et cetera. So I went down to Green Valley, which is south of Tucson, and is mainly a retirement community and pretty progressive. And I met with a group of women there and started to talk about it. And a woman there who was retired and living there said, I worked in Martha Griffith's office when she first went in and got the ERA passed. And all of us in the room just went, oh my God, tell us the story. So I stood up and she told her story of what happened. And here's what she told us. That when Martha was elected from Michigan and she moved into the office, she did what everybody does. You go through the drawers, you clean them out, to put your own stuff in them. You go through the filing cabinets to clean them out, to put your own stuff in it and to organize, etc. So she's going through the filing cabinets and she pulls out, oh, I thought I should have one here, but I don't. She pulls out a manila folder when we had such things, and pulls it out of the filing cabinet, and on the little tab, on the top where you wrote what it was about, it said broads. Broads. Now, what could that mean in the office of a person in Congress? So she opened it up. It was the ERA. She was furious. And this woman who was her secretary or assistant at the time, that she was just furious and said, I'm going to get this passed. And she did. Not the first year. She tried it the year before. She didn't get it passed the first year. She got it passed the next year. So don't mess with old broads.
They're some of the finest people I know.
Right on. And I used to have this on my email saying, don't mess with old women because the idea of a life sentence gets shorter every day. Right?
Indeed. All right. Question 6. The ERA was passed by Congress in 1972. What senator promoted its passage from here in Arizona? And that was Sandra Day O'Connor.
And her support was, iffy. She supported it, and she said in one of her letters that we should put it on the ballot for a referendum. Well, we could have done that, but that wouldn't have passed it. That wouldn't have ratified it. And we've thought about that as far as the ERA movement was to have it actually put it on the ballot like an initiative. Well, you can, but that, according to the federal law, doesn't ratify it. And the legislators do not have to do what you tell them. They didn't have to ratify it, even though we would have passed it. So we didn't do it because it wouldn't have achieved the ultimate purpose. So that's still where we are today. And Arizona is one of the 13 states that has not yet ratified it. That's why we're still going, and we will keep going until we get it ratified.
All right. So how many times was the ERA heard in the Senate? 26 times. Wow.
One of the interesting things about this, if you read the journals of the Senate, just like they do today, they keep, well, now it's all, digital, but they keep the hard copy journals. And after these votes, or they didn't get votes, most of the time there wasn't even a vote. It wasn't even assigned to a committee. There was only 2 different votes in the older days, and then one in 2019. And the women, many of the women wrote comments or had comments inserted into the journal, both the House and Senate in the 70s. And what they said is still what we say today. This is ridiculous. What's wrong with you people? Women need to have equality. We do just as much as anybody else. We're entitled to this, blah, blah, blah. So pretty much the same comments. And you read them and you go, it's 50 years ago. And here we are. Well, yeah, here we are.
And here we are.
And here we are.
All right. So back in 2019, what was used to inform residents about the ERA? Billboards. I love that people could drive around and be educated.
And we deliberately put them on the roads of the legislators who lived in the rural areas who had to drive by them.
Oh.
They were not in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area, because we couldn't afford those. So we had one going up the Beeline Highway to Payson, and we had one somewhere on I-40 between like Holbrook and Winslow, or somewhere up there. They're cheaper. That's all we could afford, but we picked them so that the legislators that would be driving to and from had to see them.
That is brilliant thinking. Maximize your resources.
Women are brilliant.
All right. Back in 2019, as we get ready for the onslaught of all those best of, I think Phoenix Magazine just came out today. The Capital Times listed the ERA as what? The hardest sell, the toughest bill and the hardest sell.
It was pretty fun. We went to the, they have a party, you know, where there's food and drink and this and that. That was also the year when we did the 38-mile march. One of our members organized a 38-mile march because we wanted to be the 38th state. 38 was the magic number. You needed 38 states to be 3/4 of the states that then made it an official amendment, which it is now, is number 28. So we wanted to be Arizona to be the 38th state. So one of our members organized a 38-mile walk, and it was all around the Phoenix area, stopping at various historical sites related to women.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, it was fun. So one of them, of course, was the Sandra Day O'Connor Federal Courthouse, but there were many others and lesser known women. And then that whole thing happened. And then they ended up down at the Capitol at noon at the same time when, you know, we were having a rally. We had national speakers, all kinds of things. That afternoon was when both the House and the Senate were going to be hearing the ERA on procedural moves. And I say procedural moves because they would not assign it to committees and the committees would not hear it. So it was never going to be able to get onto the floor in regular motion. And you're going to talk about that later. So it was not able to get onto the floor in regular business. So we had to use, and have used previously, procedural moves to get it onto the floor. So that's what was going to happen in both of the houses. And so all of this sort of culminated on that one day.
Wow. All right. What was Donna Carlson West against? And she was against the ERA. And then I found this article, the mother of the Stop ERA movement.
Did they mention her, or was it Schlafly?
No, it was an article all about her.
It was all about her. Yeah. So the Arizona person. Well, what I found was interesting. Phyllis Schlafly is often given credit for being the mother of the Stop ERA movement. And she was a lawyer and she had several children, and she told women you should be home baking cookies. And we scratched our head and said, well, why aren't you home baking cookies? You know, if that's what you believe women should be doing, what are you doing out here lecturing, traveling the country, lecturing and being on the news? And, you know, well, hypocrisy knows no bounds with certain political parties, shall we say. So I found out years later, I did not know at the time, I was much younger and, 40 years younger. And I didn't know all the things I know now, but she was funded by Koch brothers money. The same Koch brothers.
Wow.
She was funded by Koch brothers money. And none of us had any idea at that time. Came out much, much, much later.
Okay. All right. And then we have our bonus question, our number 11. Who was Peter Kay? He was a senator. He was chair of the House Judiciary Committee. He was also a parliamentarian.
Well, how I got to know, I can't say I know him. I've talked to him on the phone. There was an article printed in the paper about the ERA and about the different times we tried to get it passed through the House and the Senate, as you mentioned earlier. And he called me up after the article and he said, you're wrong, Dianne. You're wrong about what you said about what happened in 1979. I think it was 1979, because that's not what happened. He said, I was a senator, I was the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and I was a parliamentarian. And what had happened was it had failed in committee. No, I think it was 74, but anyway, it had failed in committee. And then it was heard on the floor. And when I first saw that, when I was looking this up down at the State Historical Library, I was looking it up and I thought, well, how did they get it on the floor when it had failed in committee? Because the usual practice is if you fail in committee, you don't go onto the floor. So that was always a mystery to me. So he called me up and straightened me out about that. And he said he used a parliamentary maneuver. He was for the ERA. Here we have another Republican for the ERA. Oh, and let me throw this in while I'm thinking about it. The Republican Party put the Equal Rights Amendment in their political party platform in 1940. 1940.
Wow.
The Democrats put the ERA in their political party platform in 1944. The Republicans took the ERA out of their platform in 1980 with Ronald Reagan and Phyllis Schlafly. The Democrats still have it in their platform. So they were late to the party, but they stuck in there anyway, whereas the Republicans bailed in 1980. So Kay was explaining to me that Donna West was the floor manager and that she was adamantly against the ERA. But he thought if he could use this parliamentary maneuver and get it on the floor, that enough people would vote for it. Well, he was wrong and it lost on the floor. But it was very interesting talking to him. I asked him, to write an article or something about that, but he never did.
Wow. And, if he hadn't made that phone call, that story would be long gone.
Absolutely.
Wow. All right. Well, I always like to end asking people, how did they do? Because I always think that, it's just kind of interesting. How did they do? It's like, I know some people did probably pretty well. Some folks may not have done so well, but that's half the fun, is just guessing and then getting to hear your amazing storytelling as you explain the answers. So while they are kind of going and doing that, so where does the ERA stand right now?
Where it stands right now, it is the 28th Amendment. So the Article 5 of the Constitution requires that two things happen. The Congress, by 2/3 vote, send it out to the states, which it did. 3/4 of the states, however many there are, 3/4 of them ratify it and send it back. That's been done. It is in the Constitution. Does everyone agree with me? Of course not. The ministerial duty of publishing it and putting it into the books is a ministerial duty. It has no impact on the efficacy of the actual law. So the fact that the archivist has not published it does not mean it's not valid. That is a ministerial duty which he's been sued to do because he didn't do it. So why didn't he do it? Because when the ERA was going on in the 70s, that Jimmy Carter was president, and Jimmy Carter's attorney general and Department of Justice put a memo into the National Archives, who is an independent agency, but is a part of the executive branch. Put a memo in there saying, wonderful, yes, fabulous, ERA, go, go, go. Then under number 45, he pulled that, and Bill Barr, he pulled that memo of Jimmy Carter and put in a different memo, which from a legal point of view is absolutely laughable for the stupidity of it. But he put in a different memo saying, no, it's not valid. And you, archivists, may not publish. So that's why the archivist, who is now retired, did not publish it. And now they have an interim archivist who's afraid to do anything. She's not going to do it. So that's where we sit with the archivist. So in every single amendment that has been passed, in which the human rights of people have been expanded, other people have fought against it. There were lawsuits against the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, and the 28th Amendment. That's us. Every time. So we being lawyers that work on this, knew that this was going to come. It was no surprise. In also those earlier amendments, all of them, 13, 14, 15, and 19, states that had passed them then later said they wanted to take that back. We want to rescind. Well, that's not valid. You can't do that. It's a one-way street. But one of the surprising states that tried to take it back was take back the 14th Amendment, the equal rights for everybody after the Civil War, was New Jersey. I mean, you expect Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida. Okay, we expect them. Those are the ones that haven't signed the ERA. and Arizona, which was a Confederate state, by the way. But New Jersey, you don't expect. But they didn't. They tried to take it back, and they were the 38th state. They made the last number of states. And then they said, oh, sorry, we want to take it back. And nope, no can do. So the rescissions are not going to stop it, nor is the timeline. And there's two reasons. When a timeline or any preface that's in a statute or a law or anything, the preface before the law is not the law. It's the preface. And any attorney will tell you that. This preface for the ERA is in, or this timeline is in the preface. It's not in the body of the law. Some of the amendments do have timelines in the body of the amendment. This is not one of them. And not all amendments have timelines at all. For example, take number 27. What is the 27th Amendment? Who knows what the 27th Amendment is? Anybody? We're looking in the chat here. Anybody know? Nobody knows. The 27th Amendment is the amendment that says, when you are sitting in your congressional seat, you cannot raise your own salary. So if you raise the salary of senators or House people and you're sitting in a seat, it doesn't go into effect till after the next election when you might not be sitting in that seat. It would be a conflict of interest to be able to raise your own salary, wouldn't it?
Indeed.
Indeed. So that's what that is addressed at, to prevent Congress critters from giving themselves raises. Now, we do know that most incumbents get reelected. We know that. So they're still going to get the benefit of that raise. But it's some small little token of trying to stop them. Now, when was that 27th Amendment first proposed to Congress? Anybody know that? No one knows the Constitution. That's right. So maybe we could have a Constitution night. That would be great. All right. That amendment was first proposed to Congress in 1797. I did not make a mistake. 1797, over 200 years ago. It was originally proposed with the first 10 amendments. It was an 11th. But then they cut it. I don't know why they like the number 10. I don't know. But they cut it and it didn't get in the first 10 amendments. But it was proposed at the same time. And it got actually passed in 1970. Yes, that's right, about when it got passed, was 1970. Because one kid in a class said, well, why wasn't this ever passed? And the teacher said, you know, it's too old now. It was passed out of Congress, but it's too old now to get passed. And he got a little older, and I don't know if he was in high school or college, but he said, I think I'll get it passed. And he did. So when they say that the Equal Rights Amendment is no longer valid because it was passed out of Congress in 23 or not into Congress in 23, out of Congress in 71, when they say that, excuse me, you validated an amendment that was 200 years old. So do not tell me that this is not valid. So the lawsuits are going on. There are two lawsuits. There's a lawsuit in Massachusetts that's just at the district court discovery stage. And there's a lawsuit, the more important one that's probably going to be the one, is in Washington, D.C. And it was brought by the three attorneys general of the last three states to ratify: Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia. When Virginia went from blue to red, they withdrew from the suit. We knew that would happen, and it doesn't change anything. It just means now it's Nevada and Illinois versus the archivist. And the suit is to force the archivist to publish the ERA. The oral argument on that is going to be on September 28th. And the briefs have all been filed. Well, we lost at the district court level. So now it's at the appeal court level in Washington, D.C., one of the, probably the most, well, New York too, one of the two most important appeals courts. So it's in the D.C. appeals court to be heard on September 28th. And the interesting part about that is there's the archivist, who was the one sued, of course, saying, well, I'll do whatever you tell me. I don't really care. You know, I don't really have any skin in this game. You just need to tell me, what am I supposed to do? And then there's the three attorneys general that say, publish the damn thing. And then there's five, basically Confederate states that are saying don't publish it because of the timeline, because of the rescissions. And then there's the government. We sought to have Biden remove that bad memo that the number 45 put in there, and either put the Carter memo back in or write your own memo and put it in. Well, they didn't do exactly what we wanted, but what they did do might turn out to be the best, because what they said was the court has nothing to do with this. Article 5 of the Constitution gives the amendment process solely to Congress to give it to the states and the states to give it back. There's not any role whatsoever for the executive, no presidential role. There's no role whatsoever for the courts. It's Congress and the states. Given the rogue Supreme cult, which is what I call it, a Supreme cult, given their behavior this last couple of months, that might be a good thing. Do we want the Equal Rights Amendment to go to the Supreme Court? No, we don't, because we know the outcome, what that will be at this crazy Supreme Court. So it may be for the best if we lose that case, because they say, court's got nothing to do with it. That may be a really good idea. Things are also happening in Congress. Two things. The House has twice passed a resolution saying that this timeline means nothing, forget about it, it's gone forever, no timeline. The problem is over in the Senate. So it's over in the Senate now, and it's H.J. Res. 17. It's been passed by the House. All the Senate has to do, Schumer has to do, put it on the floor and vote on it. H.J. Res. 17. Contact your senators, both of them, and tell them, get it on the floor of the Senate and vote on it. The Senate also has their own bill that says there's no timeline, forget it, done. So they have that as well, and that's S.J. Res. 1. That is in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. So that has to still pass out of that, which it could. Who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee? Nadler's House. So who's the Senate chair? I can't remember. But anyway, so the Senate, the Judiciary Committee would have to get it out. But there's no reason. There's no reason to do that. You've already got a passed one. This is the House one that's already passed. So you Senate pass it, and it's done. So then that argument, even though it's a false argument, even though it is not a good argument from a legal point of view, because timelines have been tried before and attacked other amendments before and lost. So it's not a good legal argument, but just to get rid of it, pass the damn thing. So that's what we're asking you to do. House Res, HJ Res 17, that's in the Senate, needs to be voted on the floor and passed. So that's where we are. Fighting, as women have to do every day for our rights.
So, Dianne, I want to say thank you so much for coming on.
And shut up.
And so, well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, it's such a complicated issue. And so, I mean, and as we talked, it's like, and you're able to distill it down so that other lay folks can understand what's going on. And you know, and I think, and what you said, it's like, you know, we've got to reach out. We've got to reach out to our legislators across whatever our beliefs are, and come November, go vote.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody has got to vote in November, but do more than that.
Right.
Work on the campaign now. Put in money if you got any. If you ain't got any, you got any time, put in some time. It's too hot kind of to walk doors. I do it at 5 a.m, but do something. Whatever you can do is valuable, even if it's a small bit. Whatever you can do is valuable, but do something.
Well, I think those are our marching orders. Do something.
Yes.
So, Dianne, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, no, indeed. It's been an amazing adventure. So until we see each other again, have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.
Bye.
And everybody else too. And you can contact me. He has my phone number, so you can get it from him, or you can just look me up online and give me a call. That's fine. I got some messages in there saying I want to talk to you. So just call me.
We will make those connections.
All right.
All right. Have a good night, Dianne.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh my gosh. That was, it was such a complicated issue that I'm kind of like, it was so great having her just kind of go through in terms of where we are now and how we even got here. So, all right. So now we're doing From the Vault. And so we're doing one of my favorite houses kind of in the valley that a lot of people don't know the history of, the Eisendrath House. So right over by the zoo, I think it's on Curry Road, there is this 1930 adobe mansion that sits there. It has recently been redone by the city of Tempe, actually by the Saguaro Foundation. And so they have redone this house, and now it's part of water conservation education because it literally sits right on the canal. But the story of this house is, so Rose Eisendrath was part of that Chicago socialite set back in the 20s and 30s who would come here to get away from those brutal Chicago winters. And so she came here with a group of friends, and when she went to go check into her hotel, she was told, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, you're Jewish, you can't stay here." So she politely said, "Okay, no problem," and walked away. She then hired a friend of her son, Robert T. Evans, to design her a mansion. And so she actually wound up passing away in this mansion. But she did invite that manager of the hotel that would not allow her to stay there. And after that, that hotel was always open to everyone to stay there if you were Jewish, which I thought was a pretty amazing house. This house comes with yet another story. It also fell into disrepair. So throughout the 80s, it was kind of a squatter's house. And it was full of artists, musicians. I've got one friend that said she went to a Meat Puppet concert on the back patio around the fire pit. There was at least one bad movie made. I think it was Bikers vs. the Undead, as well as lots of fashion shows I've heard were held in that house. So you can book the house for different events. You can also get a tour of the house. It's pretty amazing how they were able to save it and bring it back to life. So now you will see why I always say, if you're watching on Facebook, there is that little white button that says, please share. Now you know why. Because we always have so much fun with Arizona history. And there you go. So here is your chance to share. Now, next week is going to be really exciting because we have, if all things go well, we also have another announcement to make as well. But we have Anne LeClaire, who is the fairly new director of the Arizona Commission on the Arts. And so that's going to be really exciting. So we're working on that right now. And that's going to be a really educational and fun show as well. So remember, you always have information you can post things in the chat. Also, if you have any suggestions for coming up shows or anything else, or even other comments, please feel free to reach out to me. I always love to give a shout out to my friends Cole and Chris, who did that great intro video at the very beginning, as well as PJ, my cocktail advisor. Thank you so much for all you do. Now, as we get ready to say good evening, the outro is going to be about 30 seconds of found film footage from people's vacations right here in Arizona. I don't think there's any sound to it, so if things go silent for a little bit, that's okay. Or maybe there is sound. It's been a while since I've played this, so that's the reason why I'm doing it. So everyone, have a great rest of your night, and I will see you here, same bat time, same bat channel.